Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I would like to bring up some misconceptions, some myths that I've seen floating around by readers during the Amazon boycott. And when I say Amazon boycott, I both mean the intermittent ones that are supposed to be popping up constantly over the course of 2025 on social media, and just the growing trend of people fully divesting and being like, I'm done for forever. And I will say, full transparency, I have not fully boycotted yet. I am working on a system of moving away. I currently get gift cards to Amazon from donating blood, and so I will use those to work through ebook series on there that are trapped to Amazon, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But my goal is that as I finish those series, any new series I begin will come from an alternate source. Itch.io, Kobo, Smashwords, and the like. I am trying to move away more and more, and in fact, I don't even think I've used my Amazon gift cards to buy any new books from them in quite a while. So I am slowly making the move, but I am not 100% boycotted yet. But ebooks are really the only thing I buy from them. I haven't really spent a lot on Amazon, actually. Not because of like any, moral high ground reasons. I just have a lot of anxiety around spending money and watching the number in my account go down, but not actually having the thing in my hand made that anxiety worse. So I just don't online shop a lot at all. But let's jump in with the first big misconception I've been seeing discussed around the Amazon boycott. Myth number 1, Kindle Unlimited is actually a loss leader. So by reading a lot, you're actually yanking money right out of Amazon's hands, and you should do it more. Okay, this is said with such confidence that I thought Amazon themselves must have released the numbers. I thought Amazon themselves must have been like, yep, the royalties we pay out to authors in Kindle Unlimited exceed the subscription amounts. But no, it just seems to be people theorizing that theoretically the user base could outread their subscription by just reading a lot, but we don't know that the majority of the user base is doing that, or even just enough of the user base is doing that to make it a loss leader. For all we know, there's a minority of people who are reading a ton and easily clocking their entire subscription and then more, but then there's another subset that's barely touching it and still keeping up their subscriptions. Because, let's be honest, there's always a subset of people that keep up subscriptions without really using them. And we don't have the numbers to know that for sure. I genuinely do not know where the confidence comes from. If you have a source to know for certain that Kindle Unlimited is a loss leader, is losing them money in that area, please let me know. Please drop it down in the comments, because the confidence has got to come from somewhere, but I'm not sure where. Regardless, even if it is a loss leaders still benefit their companies. They are still good for the companies. They're just good in a way that's not direct profit. And usually it's in some realm of marketing. It brings in the customers, and then the customers spend more money elsewhere. But Kindle Unlimited as a loss leader is much more direct. It keeps authors trapped. And yes, I use that word directly because I have been working with indie authors since 2019, January of 2019, and I have heard indie authors use that form of verbiage around Kindle Unlimited. They feel trapped because they have to be in Kindle Unlimited. That's where the majority of readership of indie books is. But part of Amazon's exclusivity agreement means that if they're in Kindle Unlimited, they can't have ebooks anywhere else. Amazon literally owns that entire format of that book. And so for a lot of authors who don't like Amazon, who don't want to be stuck with Amazon, are forced because that's the only way they can actually make a living off of their art. And yes, you can go wide, but it's not nearly the same amount of authorship. Now, this is not to say that you definitely shouldn't do Kindle Unlimited. We are working in a very morally gray area. There is no perfect consumption at this point. But I want to undo this myth that it's somehow going to hurt Amazon to pay for and use one of the services it provides. Even if we did get to a point where a giant majority of the user base was doing the thing and outreading and it was becoming too much of a drain, they would just stop it. They would just change it. They would take something away. They wouldn't just let something draining funds keep going. This is a mega corporation in a line goes up economy. And overall, I think this is more of like it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy thing. This idea that you can stick it to the big bad corporation by just reading a lot. That thing you already want to do. You can both read a lot and be like attacking the man. It's not feasible. It's not realistic. Using Kindle Unlimited is still benefiting Amazon. It is still benefiting them to have all of these ebooks that legally can't be sold anywhere else. Because I've never used Kindle Unlimited. Never. I don't read enough of that specific format to justify the subscription cost. And I've still bought ebooks from them. So it could be that even if KU is specifically losing them money, just having those ebooks not available anywhere else is making up all of the cost. Just the act of keeping indie authors unable to sell ebooks anywhere else is doing the dirty work for them. Now, the good news here is that the exclusivity agreements aren't for forever. I don't know the exact amount of time that each contract is set for, but it will be up at some point, and eventually, hopefully, those authors will have the option to go wide if they need to. Or want to. Most of them want to, but for the most part, authors can't go wide until readers go wide. And I've talked about this before, but this is not that. Hello, it's the next day. I had put out some feelers online to connect with some indie authors and get a little bit more into Kindle Unlimited. And without giving names or anything, I discovered two things. One, the payout from Kindle Unlimited changes month to month per page. One author was able to give me like the direct numbers, and yes, it's a fraction of a decimal in some cases, but when it's your livelihood, that fraction of a decimal can mean the difference between paying bills or not. And two, Kindle Unlimited is actually less support than just buying the ebooks outright. One author explained that a full read-through of one of their novellas on KU paid out less than half the royalties of someone just buying it as an ebook outright. So if you are still looking into what's the best way to get more money into authors' hands that you like, you probably would be better off not going through KU, because again, those payouts could drop, and instead just buying the ebook outright. Again, I'm not telling anyone to actually do that, but if that's what you're using Kindle Unlimited for, that would probably be a better option just in terms of sheer numbers. So let's move on to the other major misconception. Myth number 2, boycotting Amazon is so easy. Just use indie bookstores and your local library. It covers everything. And I love the optimism that you see, that you think this country, because they're usually American, is just filled with robust library systems and indie bookstores just everywhere. It's wrong, but I love the optimism because I've talked about this before. We kind of overestimate just how many people are living near good library systems. I've mentioned before that when I was a kid from the ages of 10 to 16, my only library connection was my school library. We did not go to the bookstores. We did not even go to the public library because we lived so rural, so far out, that we could not afford the gas money for local town trips other than when it was absolutely needed. So those ages, only my school library. And then we moved to a town that was still just as rural, but in a different way. It's hard to explain. And my only access was school library and the singular one building library, no interlibrary loans, no grader system. What was in there was it. So it's still not a lot. And at the time in that town, not only was there not an indie bookstore, there wasn't even a chain bookstore. Okay, not even a Barnes & Noble, a BAM, was Borders still around at that point? I don't know. But nothing. No access to any bookstore. I had to buy any books out of fucking Walmart and Target. Because yes, we still had a Target. And at the time, it was literally where the only Starbucks in town was in the Target. So I lived in that situation for years, and people still are living in those situations where they don't have a robust library system nearby. They don't have an indie bookstore nearby. Now, indie bookstores are making an incredible comeback. There's one that's been open in my area for a year now. They just had their anniversary, and they are doing fucking gangbusters. I went to Independent Bookstore Day, and then I talked to the owner about it at a later bookish event, and they explained to me that they had to drop $5,000 just to restock the shelves. They had to ask for donations just to restock their secondhand shelves, and they had sold out of basically all of the Independent Bookstore Day merch. It was great. The town I'm living in is also way bigger and already has way more amenities. So this is an area that can actually support an independent bookstore a lot better. But this idea that like, oh, they'll just universally cover everything Amazon did, again, not feasible. Now, yes, you could buy if you wanted every book you purchased to be more expensive, because they don't really do the same, free shipping deals that Amazon Prime can do. So you just are spending more money that way if you can't get to the store. And also, if you're me and you don't actually want to contribute that much to fossil fuel use, that's also another factor. But also, ebooks. Indie bookstores don't do a lot with ebooks. Now, yes, there is Libby. I love Libby. I just finished listening to an audiobook of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie on Libby. Love it. But again, it's all dependent on what your local library can afford to put on it. And those library ebook copies are ungodly in their price. Okay, they are. Trad publishing is flat out robbing libraries. I'm just going to say it. But regardless, no, it is not a universal cure-all to just go to indie bookstores and local libraries. Now, that being said, yes, there is bookshop.org, because people bring it up. They did very, very recently release their ebook shop, but as of right now, it still does not have the most robust library and DRM attached, which means you do not actually own those ebooks. You are renting the right to look at them. And if at any point certain, censorship things happen, they can be yanked right out of your library again, and you can't do anything about it. Now, I am currently working on a video series where I talk about ebook alternatives to Amazon, where you can go. I just put up the first one. Well, not just. It's actually been a while. I really need to get on that episode 2. But regardless, I just put up the first episode for Itch.io, one of my new favorites. I will link that down in the description. But overall, when we're talking about replacing the inner workings of a mega corporation, you can't expect a local business to undertake all of that. You can't expect a singular entity to just step up and be everything Amazon was, because Amazon became everything it was because it was filling in a gap, because people needed the extra help and the extra resources. Now, again, indie bookstores have been experiencing a resurgence. So there are a lot of people who think there's a gap but might not be there anymore. That tiny itty bitty town that only had the little library now does have an indie bookstore. It's little. It's real little. I mean, if you walk in there with a group of 3 friends, y'all better be real close to each other, because you're going to basically be brushing up against each other the entire time you're in there. Okay, but it's there. They have it. There is an indie bookstore there, and yes, they have queer books. I have checked, and indie books. I've also checked that. But, oh yeah, we got to talk about indie books. Of all of the groups involved in the boycott, indie authors are probably getting fucked over the most, because people don't know how to support them without Amazon. Let's call this misconception number 3. You know what? We're upping it to 3. People don't know how to support indie authors outside of Amazon. I discovered, as a reaction to a Blue Sky post, that a lot of people just assume that indie bookstore equals indie books, because I posted a Blue Sky post during the first wave of the Amazon boycotts earlier this year, like, oh, hey guys, remember, you can find indie ebooks at these other sources. And I listed things like Itch.io, Kobo, Smashwords, and Barnes & Noble. We can have the Barnes & Noble debate, but they're not Amazon and they sell indie ebooks. And I had several replies that thought I was calling Barnes & Noble an independent bookstore. I can't believe OP thinks B&N is indie. I don't. I think they sell indie ebooks, which is an objective statement of fact. That is a true statement. That doesn't make them indie, because indie bookstores don't, by definition, sell indie books. In fact, they sell only a tiny minority of indie books. In your average indie bookstore, you're lucky if there's 2 shelves. Okay, even 2 shelves might be a little bit much. In most cases, there's just 1. Okay, there might be one that's really ahead of the curve and has like a whole bookcase, but I haven't seen it. And I try to go to every indie bookstore around me. And I'm not saying they have to, right? They have to keep the lights on too. They have to stack the books that will sell, or else they risk going under. But I have heard stories of indie authors that have tried to reach out and make connections with indie bookstores, and they tend to get the snub. It's been a very slow going process to create those bridges where more indie books end up in indie stores. And for right now, that means that indie authors are getting the brunt of the worst parts of all of this. Now, this is not me telling you to go back to Kindle Unlimited. This is not me telling you to go back to shopping from Amazon. This is me telling you that you are probably going to have to work harder than you think to seek out the authors to continue supporting them. Because yeah, when you use Kindle Unlimited, you were basically guaranteed to be reading all indie. Most trad books aren't gonna let their ebooks be put in that kind of exclusivity deal. I double checked this, and yes, there are trad books in Kindle Unlimited, but they tend to be very select ones, and they tend to be like debuts, lesser known authors, like the big hitters aren't going to be in there for the most part. But I still think, generally speaking, it is like the land of the indie books over there, just in general. But for indie authors, that's basically all that's in there. So a lot of people, when they gave up Kindle Unlimited, they gave up Amazon, they didn't realize they were just giving up all indie authors. Because I've spoken to indie authors that do sell wide, that have all of these options, and they have explained to me that their Amazon sales have plummeted, but nothing else has picked up to compete with the slack. Nobody's moved to these other options to keep supporting indie authors. They've just been abandoned entirely. And that's not okay. And this goes to show that the switch from Amazon to alternatives is not going to be quick and easy and one solution fits all. It's going to take some searching. It's going to take looking up your favorite indie author and figuring out where else they are or keeping tabs on them so that if they do go wide, you can immediately start buying from them again. And like I said before, Itch.io, Smashwords, Kobo, all indie, all options. They sell ebooks. I know for Itch.io and Smashwords it's DRM free. I don't know if Kobo is. You would have to research that. But regardless, you are going to have to work to still support those indie authors because, for better or worse, Amazon made it easy to support indie authors. For all the horrible things it's done, and it has done a lot of horrible things, it was a huge benefit to indie authors and was honestly part of the reason that indie books took off circa 2016 as much as they did. So replacing that is going to take some time. It's going to take some work, and it's going to take actually wanting to continue the support manually that you were already doing automatically. And that is it. Our 3 misconceptions around the Amazon boycott when it comes to books. If you have seen any others, let me know. If you disagree, you may respectfully do so in the comments. Seriously though, if anyone has a source for that loss leader thing, like hard numbers from the company I'd love to see that. I'd really like to see the numbers. But regardless, I'm not here to judge what level of participation is the right one. If you are still using Kindle Unlimited to get those authors their little bit of pay, if you are total boycott and have been for forever, no judgment either way. I'm pretty sure if you've clicked on this video, you're at least interested and invested in this mega corporation having less of a stranglehold over our hobby. I think that's safe to say. But the road to get there is going to be long and filled with very imperfect choices. And we just got to keep our eyes open for all the nuances and go into it realistically as possible, because that's how we're going to make it actually happen. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.